Are Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives on the verge of imploding? In this video, I will discuss that very thing with some wild news that broke this week. So first, let me just show you the current seat makeup, or I should say the makeup as of the election that happened this year. Liberals won with a minority government with 169 seats. They needed 172 to form a majority. The reason why this is important is because right now they have a budget that was just tabled. And to get that passed, they're going to need some support. Well, one way to do that is to reach out to the NDP. That's usually what happens, and try to get some of that support through various things that are in the budget that can get them to support it. Another way is to get Conservatives, which you're not going to get under Pierre Poilievre because he's incredibly just anti-Liberal Party no matter whatever they do. But if you peel off some of those Conservative MPs into the Liberal Party, then you potentially have your support. So this is worth noting before we get to the first story here. Poilievre says he's confident he'll survive his January leadership review. That was from November 1st. Just a few days later, this piece hit. I'm a former senior aide to Stephen Harper, of course, former Conservative Prime Minister. Pierre Poilievre is dismantling the principled, trustworthy Conservative Party we tried to build, where he goes on in a absolutely scathing opinion piece, just tearing him apart, saying months after losing the federal election, Pierre Poilievre seems not to have learned the lessons of his electoral defeat. For all the fiery slogans and viral clips Canadians saw through the performance, going on to say voters wanted maturity, reassurance, and vision. He gave them grievance. He ran as the angry question period debater, not the steady hand of a G7 nation. The result, swing voters waited for growth that never came. His message was reduced to punchlines. Carbon tax Carney and sneaky Mark Carney may have earned social media points, but it insulted the intelligence of voters craving real dialogue. So again, I'll link to all my sources below. You can go read that piece if you want. But it is just tearing him apart in a time where his leadership right now is incredibly shaky, especially after this news broke. MP Chris Detremont says he joined Liberals because of Poilievre's leadership style. So let me play the clip from the man himself discussing why he left the Conservative Party to immediately join the Liberals.
What was the deciding factor in crossing the floor? And if you could also indulge, how many other Conservatives in your caucus feel the same way that you do?
Well, let's start with the story of how I got here. I would think over the last number of months, I wasn't feeling that I was aligned with the ideals of what the leader of the opposition had been talking about. So I've been sort of relooking at what my career is bringing and what I can do for my constituency. So over the last little bit, talking to many of my friends in the Liberal Party, as Deputy Speaker, I got to know a lot of those members personally, ask questions, see what's going on, and understanding the point that we are in Canadian history, where it's time to actually try to lead a country, to try to make it better. And not try to knock it down, not to continue to be negative. In my case, as a Nova Scotian, we're always trying to find ways to work together to solve the issues that are important to our communities. And I didn't see it by sitting in the opposition. I saw it by being a part of the government caucus.
Prochaine question.
Sorry, and just in terms of how many other Conservatives feel the same way that you do that are currently sitting in caucus?
Yeah, I would suggest that there probably are those that are in the same boat, but I will let them tell their stories if that time comes.
So there are other Conservative MPs in the same boat that clearly he doesn't want to speak on publicly because they haven't spoke. But there is another one that did in fact leave the Conservative caucus this week. We'll get to that in a minute. But it's worth noting here the impact that this sort of thing has on, or already had, on the Liberal budget that was tabled. Because they purposely did not try and get the NDP support for this budget, the budget itself is incredibly conservative. And I'll get to some commentary from others on that in a bit here. But this is the result. When you go out to reach to Conservatives with a conservative budget, if you get people who really are not happy with Pierre Poilievre and his leadership style and the way he, just the man he is, which I've done many videos on and discussed many times, people do not like Pierre Poilievre. In fact, I think it's very clear he is the reason that the Conservatives went from leading the Liberals in big numbers to losing to them in the election. Of course, the fact that Trudeau was replaced also was a big factor there. But if Pierre Poilievre was a likable conservative leader to most people and someone that Canadians couldn't directly compare to Donald Trump in his politics, I don't think the impact would have been as great as it was in that election. But this gets to his seat. So Chris Detremont is in a very safe seat to do this sort of thing. You're not going to find many seats where it's this close. Him switching from conservative to liberal is unlikely to have an impact on his actual political career going into the future because of how liberal Nova Scotia tends to be. So he's going to be fine. But this commentary here from Alex Marland, a Canadian politics professor at Acadia University, who said, quote, crossing the floor is such a polarizing, upsetting thing that it would be more likely that we'd see people sitting as independents to express their discontent. As an independent, you can still vote with the government. It is far more shocking to me that you saw Chris Detremont cross the floor directly from the Conservatives right over into the Liberals. Marland said in his research, the number one reason for crossing the floor is unhappiness with leadership. So it is noteworthy here that he didn't just cross to the Liberal Party, or I should say to being independent, but he did in fact cross to the Liberals. Now, again, I don't think it's just because of his unhappiness with leadership and his support for the budget. It's also the fact that it's very safe for him to do so, considering the seat that he's in. But this gets to this tweet from Sharon Carr, who used to work for the Liberals, is now a contributor to CTV, writing here, been speaking to a lot of Conservative Party insiders and MPs who say Pierre Poilievre keepers are threatening to ruin anyone thinking of crossing the floor, digging up personal dirt, blackmail, the works. For a party that preaches freedom, they sure act like thugs. Pretty disgusting. Now, I want to be clear. Evidence has not been provided, but this is a claim that apparently was referenced by several reports discussing what may be going on behind the scenes with the Conservative Party during this time, as when you get one fall, it's a big deal, especially during budget week. When you get a second one who maybe doesn't join the Liberals but is leaving caucus, it becomes an even bigger story. If there are more, then you can understand the worry within the Conservative Party, especially within Pierre Poilievre's leadership team, that they do not want to have this become a massive thing that ends up leading to him losing his leadership review. But this gets to the two. This is the second guy who left the Conservative caucus this week, Conservative MP Matt Genereux, who did not join the Liberals, but is resigning completely. So his letter is a little bit bizarre. It starts by saying, don't talk to my family. Okay. He then goes on to essentially write a letter. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you can read it yourself, or I'll link to it below the video, where the letter is written as if they had just lost the election. Like this letter reads like it was written in April or May, as opposed to November. So it's very just generic about how he's disappointed that the Conservatives weren't able to form government, and he wants to spend time with his family. Weird timing, I would say, on this letter, considering the week when you have someone else leave to join the Liberals, when you have all this discussion about pressure being put on these MPs to not leave the Conservative Party. So naturally, two sources tell CTV News that Genereux had conversations with senior staffers from Prime Minister Mark Carney's office as recently as Wednesday morning. Following that meeting, the impression among all those involved was that Genereux would be crossing the floor. As speculation ramped up around Parliament Hill over his potential floor crossing, a source close to Genereux tells CTV News that Conservative Party officials made it known to him that there would be consequences if he did floor cross. So, based on this reporting, it sounds like he was planning to cross the floor to join the Liberals, decided not to at the last minute because of these potential threats of what it would mean for him, his career, his family, and instead is just resigning because he can't deal with the pressure. Now, he does go on to eventually, like this report does go on to discuss that he denies that report and says, in fact, that wasn't the reason, that there was, I want to be clear, there was no coercion involved in my decision to resign. But again, interesting timing. Very weird. So, I just want to point out his seat is one that he probably could have crossed and been fine, 6 points away. Again, in a scenario where there is another election, it likely is not going to be anytime soon. But that said, this would be a seat that you could see the Liberal Party trying to flip for a floor crosser. This gets some commentary here from Laurie Turnbull. She's a Dalhousie University political science professor.
The letter he put out was extremely unusual. In all of my years of being a political addict, I have never seen an MP leave and say, please do not contact my family. So this is very, very unusual. It is not a good moment for Pierre Poilievre at all, and especially leading up to a leadership review in the not too distant future.
And we're going to talk more about that in just a moment here. What do you think this could potentially then mean for the Liberals, if anything, since it would seem that Jenna Roux is leaving politics?
Right. So, I mean, in the immediate future, in the next few days, few weeks, if Mr. Jenna Roux doesn't show up to vote, it's one less Conservative vote. It means that they've got, they're that much closer to being able to get the budget to pass. They'll need one fewer abstention from the NDP, for example. Overall, it doesn't change the math considerably because they're still in a minority government situation. However, there's some discrepancy or confusion or lack of clarity about when Mr. Jenna Roux will actually resign. If he resigns soon, that gives the Prime Minister an opportunity to call an immediate by-election in that Edmonton riding and run somebody in the riding who would be really competitive, who is close to him, who would be a business Liberal maybe. So there's an opportunity there for the Liberals to pick up a seat.
So even though he's not joining the Liberals, this does benefit them in a couple ways. But there is some confusion over when he's leaving. So there's mixed reporting on whether it's not, again, the resignation letter was this week. Bizarre time to to drop it. But according to Pierre Poilievre, he's not leaving yet. In fact, he's apparently going to be stepping down next spring, which, again, weird thing to put in your thank you message to him. Almost as if to put it down in writing. Like, you told me you're leaving next spring, so we're going to make that public in this tweet about you leaving while I thank you for your service. Try to maybe, I guess, hold him to that, because if it's sooner, then, as mentioned there, you could have someone else run, or the Liberals could have someone else run for this seat and win it. But here is the reality. So 2 connected Tories who spoke to Global News worried there were more symptoms of a malaise that has fallen over the party since April's election loss. Quote, in caucus, there's a reasonably widespread concern that maybe Pierre can never get it done, and they're not sure he's taking steps to improve, one Conservative source who was granted anonymity to speak about internal party business told Global News. A second source agreed with the assessment. So clearly there is some unhappiness within the Conservative Party caucus over Pierre Poilievre's leadership. That does not speak well for his future review. But this gets to what I want to end on here, and that is just this budget, which, as the breach writes here, a budget for tanks, banks, and oil barons. This is a Conservative Party budget under a Liberal government. So there's a few great pieces on this. I will link to the discussion here between Desmond Cole and Martin Lukács under this video. There's also this breakdown from the Narwhal on these are the environmental programs to be cut under Carney's first budget. So cuts to environmental programs, a very conservative thing to do. Also, Ricochet here, great piece, just comparing 2 very different visions. A tale of 2 visions for Canada's future as Mark Carney's budget doubles down on austerity. Zoran Mamdani's victory in New York shows what bold, people-powered politics can look like and how Canadians deserve better. Essentially comparing this bold vision that Zoran Mamdani has for New York, this people-powered vision of taxing the wealthy and investing into public services, versus Mark Carney's, which is the complete opposite of the typical neoliberalism, handouts to corporations while cutting public services, which also is already going to result in at least 16,000 public sector job cuts, likely another 30,000 coming, and 15% cuts across the board, except in the military, of course. So there's investments into military, but cuts everywhere else. Again, an incredibly conservative budget proposal, which it's not surprising to see Conservative MPs who aren't happy with Pierre Poilievre be willing to cross the floor to vote for the budget. But I will link to all these pieces below the video. They are worth reading and understanding what's going on here. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like and subscribe and check out some of the other videos I have on this channel.